Hello everyone. Today's topic is about anxiety. What is anxiety? What kind of strategies we can utilize to handle anxiety and feelings of anxiety? How we can manage it? How we can understand it? I think that there is an epidemic of anxiety worldwide nowadays. There are a lot of people who are suffering from anxiety symptoms, of anxiety conditions and the feelings of anxiety without knowing why. So first of all, it's very important to understand what's the root of my anxiety, why I'm feeling anxious. In many cases, it's very difficult for us to identify what's the root, because many of us may feel anxious without knowing any objective or specific source that create these feelings of fear and anxiety, but we feel constantly restless or anxious or full of fear inside, right? So anxiety is feeling due to a perception of lacking control. So it's a response of perceived insecurity and a subjective feeling of fear inside our body and nervous system. Fear is about, fear, the feeling of fear is associated with an objective and a specific source of danger, which is surrounding us with its concrete, and we can identify, we can name, and we can see, and we can relate ourselves to. But when it comes to anxiety, there isn't any necessarily, there isn't any specific source of danger, but it's only a general subjective feeling of being scared, being concerned, or being anxious or tensed in our body. So anxiety, as you might know, have a very physical manifestation. It means that it creates a lot of physical sensations and symptoms at body level, and that's why body exercise, somatic exercises, are very important in the context of psychotherapy to help clients to regulate their anxiety and then to discover the roots of anxiety. Because for me, it's more kind of emotional state, more of an emotional state which is a result of locking up and suppressing emotions during time. So when you feel constantly anxious, it can be a case, it can be a sign of a fact that your system is dealing with a lot of suppressed and neglected and not acknowledged emotions that you have just piled up and bottled up during time without being conscious about this. And so in psychotherapy, you get help to sort out and to figure out and to find out kind of emotions, what feelings are there that you're not aware about, or you didn't have time or opportunity to express and put words and to stand up for yourself and resolve these emotions. So if we just consider a spectrum, and fear and feeling nervous or little scared, it at one point, a feeling of anxiety is almost at the opposite point. It means that anxiety is a very overwhelming, could be a very overwhelming subjective experience. And if these feelings of anxiety get to a top level, then we have panic attacks, panic reactions. So panic attacks actually has, like other psychological conditions, like other reactions, has also a wisdom and intelligence, because it contributes to releasing a big amount of suppressed emotions all at once. But at the same time, the same as anxiety symptoms, even if it's not dangerous and you will most probably survive from a panic attack nearly in all cases, and you will not die of it, but it's so unpleasant and dreadful, and it's frightening. It at some point it's like a nearly death experience for most of the people. So when when you are not aware, and at some point unconsciously you ignore, you have been conditioned or learned that you have to avoid these emotions and these reactions because of these suppressions and your anxiety symptoms through time, then your body send a louder alarm, like in a form of a panic attack. So we have different forms of anxiety reactions, anxiety disorders. We can have social phobia, as you might have known, which is about feeling anxious in social settings and in interpersonal communication with other people, or a generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, which is also a very common one, that you have all the time across different situations, life situations. You may feel anxious without being able to point out that this is the reason that I feel anxious about. Anxiety is one of the psychological conditions that has a very strong potential to get generalized. So the generalization effect of anxiety is quite high. It means that if you feel anxious in certain situation and you don't do something with that and just ignore that, and you do not help your body to calm down, then it may happen that your body get conditions to similar situations, and then finally to all situations that have no similar lines or proximity with the original situations that scared you. So since anxiety, as I mentioned, is something that happens inside our body, and it's about our suppressed emotions and so on, and so at least in clinical settings we should learn our clients, and also in other situations when we want to do some self-help and help ourselves to manage our anxiety, we have to do some exercises and stabilization work with our body and nervous system. One of the exercises that I usually use, of course there are many examples of these exercises, but one of very common one called somatic experience or somatic exercise is the one which we use gradual process of calming nervous system down by, for example, by grounding feet, pressing feet to the ground for a few seconds and feel this press, and then try to inhale and have a deep breath. Breath, as I mentioned you before, is one of the basic stabilization tools that we have inside, embedded in our nervous system. And so breath can help us a lot to regulate our anxiety and feeling of subjective or perception of fear. And then after inhaling for a few seconds, holding it and exhaling, then you can go ahead with rolling your shoulders back and forth for a few times, and at some point warm up your body and making an anchor in your body, and try to help your body and your system to understand that you're in the present moment and you're safe. There is no uncertainty right now in the present moment. You can see around, observe the situation, the room that you are, and see your body, different parts, your hands, your arms, your legs, and then you just try to a progressive muscle screening exercise, which is about shifting your attention from one muscle groups to another, from top to toe, to just do a stabilization exercise, do this entire focus work when you feel that okay, you are back to the present moment. Of course, it could be a little difficult for you to do these practices at the beginning, but it will be much easier afterwards. So as I mentioned, in psychotherapy, I'm very interested in searching through the past and to see if there has been some emotional traumas, or there have been some past experiences that did cause some disruptions in the processes of internal processes, which we call trauma, and some situations, some conflicts, something that happened in the past that made this person very anxious or concerned, or gave this person a lot of pressure, mental pressure and tension, and at some point we figure out, okay, there was a very unpleasant happening, or something that happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and so on, and then we try to focus on that specific happening to help that person to sort out and to release this energy and this emotional burden in the system. But sometimes we cannot find out, and it happens very often, because many of those emotional traumas are related to attachment issues, attachment traumas, or very tiny and small occasion traumas that happen regularly, systematically, during long period of time during your childhood, and so you don't have explicit memory about that, and sometimes it is much more difficult to reach out. Then we have to work some psychotherapy, in the sense that we try with some techniques and to reach out the subconscious of the patient, and all the unconscious mental activities that are going on. We try to sort out what kind of perceptions or experiences are locked in the system that cause a lot of tension in a system. So that may sound a little complicated, but to me the most important thing is to understand that anxiety is the phenomenon that is happening on the surface level, and it's a result of some emotional experiences that are happening in maybe subconscious level, inner level. And then the most important thing is to go through this anxiety and try to feel them out and expose ourselves to these symptoms, instead of going around these symptoms and just avoid confronting and exposing ourselves to them, because that's a very important point for when it comes to treatment of all types of anxiety disorders, that the most important thing is to help people to not avoiding means to exposure. So if, for example, if we are feeling very anxious and we are struggling with these physical sensations of anxiety, like tight stomach or shaky hands and fingers, or tense shoulders, chest, and so on, which is very typical classical symptoms of anxiety, then we have to, as I told you, we have to focus on the body level on these symptoms and try to go through and just observe them. At the beginning, these anxiety symptoms start to get intensified and get worsened at some point, and that's the point that most of the people give up and do not want or are not willing to continue, because they feel that okay, it's worsening, and then it's not good, or it will be harmful for me to continue with that. But the point is that these anxiety symptoms will increase to some level, to some threshold, and then they will get decreased gradually. So it's very important things to know when you're doing these exercises, because that's the very turning point for many of us that always have imagined that this will not help me because my experiences are just getting intensified and giving me worse and worse feelings of anxiety. So I don't want to continue and make my anxiety even bigger than this, because it's not I cannot tolerate that. So these, when these feelings of anxiety are there in a consistent mode, it means that our nervous system, our brain, is probably conditioned to use survival mechanisms or strategies very often, more often than it's needed. Survival strategies are basically based on fight, flight, freeze mode. When you are in flight freeze mode, then your nervous system is overactivated. A nervous system which is constantly overactivated is a nervous system which perceives surroundings, the world, the people itself unsafe, insecure, right? So to help your body, yourself, to come back to this sense of calmness and expand this tolerance threshold, therefore reduce anxiety, it's important to help your nervous system to understand that you do not need this fight, flight, freeze reactions or mode. You do not need, your nervous system do not need to be activated and to all the time wait for something dangerous to happen, right? So, and this this kind of mindful work and exercise we should do by these small stabilization bodily experiences, somatic exercises that I have mentioned, and also some other cognitive strategies. That there is a technique which is called cognitive diffusion. It means that at the time that you understand that it is about just symptoms and it is not about you, your identity, your personality, it's about anxiety. It doesn't mean that you are a weak person that have this problem that cannot resolve these anxiety and the feelings around them, and that you start to take a distance from these symptoms and reflect about them, and to detach your symptoms from yourself, then this will help yourself to expand your attention span and to start reflecting. And then these reflection give a sense of control, give a sense of safety, and nervous system will also start to to come down to a state of mind which is not very tensed, or at least a little calmer. So it's very important to start to put word and express the feelings that you feel at the time that you're anxious. Many people struggle with naming and expressing the physical sensations and the feelings that come up when they are anxious. They may, for example, that I feel that I cannot do because I'm a weak person or I'm anxious all the time. But the reality is that this person feel anxious of being there, in that situation, or doing that specific thing because of his feeling, right? Because of this feeling of fear or anxiety. So it's very important to be concrete and very clear about expressing feelings, and not to be judgmental or to be a little biased against ourselves, when we are working with our feelings, anxieties, right? So anxiety, as I told you, can manifest in two different forms. It can appear in a very objective form, that you have a lot of physical sensation and a lot of these typical symptoms of anxiety in different, for example, social situations and so on. So you know what's your profile, what's your anxiety profile. So it is little more at some point. Maybe it is little easier for someone to handle this situation, but for other people, their anxiety may have a little hidden form, in the sense that they may feel anxious without being very conscious about that. For example, by over-explaining themselves, and unconsciously trying all the time to prove that they have right, or to justify their needs and so on, without being in contact with their actual needs, with their bodies, and being in alignment with their authentic needs and feelings. And they all the time are overactivated in this overactivated and anxious mode in their nervous system, and they have to be talkative and argument, and have these proving attempt to at some point indirectly handle this anxiety that they don't have any attachment or connection with. Or sometimes I have also, when working with some clients, have felt that their anxiety in many cases is a result of living in a very challenging environment. For example, in a childhood, that they had to deal with difficult persons. So if you're in childhood, if you have to constantly deal with and relate yourself to difficult people that are demanding or are pressing you, criticizing you, then you have to be like in a defense or guard mode to defend yourself and to be prepared to respond, or you become little hyper vigilant toward your surroundings and the people around you, and then your nervous system start to be conditioned to this response, and then you become an adult that who have these reactions all the time without being conscious about it. But you know that at some point, that you're all the time suffering from some unpleasing feeling inside you, that you think that it's about anxiety and feeling nervous, but you cannot point out, and you cannot identify what's the root, what's the origin, why it is there. So our past, it's very important to discover and to embrace and to understand, because many of traumas and our past experiences are with us and are living in our body and creating a lot of complex feelings. It makes the systems that it goes all the time in standby mode, that we do not go ahead, in the sense that we do not feel that we are living our life in a present moment. Our nervous system is just stuck in the past, but our conscious mind, which is operating according to these mental activities that is occurring in prefrontal cortex, is not aware of that. We do not know, and that's why psychotherapy gives us a very good opportunity to delve into our past and to understand, to discover what's the roots, why we feel anxious about life, why we are anxious in our relationships, why we do not prioritize ourselves, our needs in interpersonal relationships with others, and become a people pleaser in many cases. People pleasers are in many cases anxious people, maybe they do not have a conscious relationship about that, but they should have some anxiety issues at least at subconscious level, right? So we can talk about anxiety very much, because that's a very important and very, as I mentioned, very common problem, challenge for many people. But we cannot forget our body and nervous system when we are working with, we want to find some solutions for our psychological reactions, especially for anxiety. Because very, very classical psychotherapy term, we can say that anxiety at many cases is about a gap between your true self and the self that you want to be, and these two are not in accord with each other. So there is a gap between you, who is living his or her life without paying attention to your internal world, internal landscape of existence, without being in touch with your emotions and these fascinating mental and emotional experiences and processes that are ongoing inside you. And that's why anxiety will become like alarm, a signal, and comes up to tell you something very important, that some very fundamental need is not met, and you have to go back and check in and find yourself again. And this path goes always through our body. Thank you and stay safe. Bye.